Turns out that Java has the ability to capture these relationships in a formal way between classes. So just like you and I know that an S list and an A list are some kind of list, there is a way to actually say that in Java. So how do we do that? Well, it's a two-step process. The first part is to define a reference type for our hypernym. So in this case, to remind you what reference type is, remember in Java there are 8 primitive types: int, short, long, float, and reference type is everything else. And so we know we can define new types like planet, in-body, A-list. So it's no different. Now we're going to define one called list61b, but we're going to see it's a little different than usual. Now the second part, once we've actually set this thing up, is we're going to specify that both S lists and A lists are actually hyponyms of list61b. So let's start by talking about how we set up a hypernym. So what we're going to do is use a new keyword we have not used before called interface. And that's going to be instead of class. So in other words, oops, that's a video of myself. Okay, so this is list61b. And so whereas before we were always saying public class list61b, now we're just going to say interface instead. Why interface? Well, it's going to have some slight twists from what we usually do with a class, and we'll see those in a moment. The big idea is that an interface is a specification of what a list can do and not how to do it. Okay. So what can a list do? Well, for example, I know it should be able to do, I can go look at a list and I can see add first, I don't know, or maybe I'll go to the top. I know every list should be able to do add last. Okay. So I could do public void add last item X. Okay. And now rather than actually writing out the code for this thing, I'm actually just going to put a semicolon, and that now is okay. Actually there's one little issue here though. You'll notice this cannot resolve symbol items because I forgot to do this. Just add my type parameter. Okay, so at this point, I basically said that list61b's should be able to add. And so I could go through this A-list class and manually look up all of these and copy them over, but I'm actually going to do something else. I'm going to copy everything over to maybe make a better point. Okay. So when I copy everything over, I'll notice something, which is that these things here are private variables. They say how you should store information. Not every list should have an array, right? So that's not part of being a list. Some lists don't have arrays at all. I don't want a constructor. I mean, that's not an obvious fact, but I don't. How about resizing? Is that something I want to keep? No, some lists don't resize, like D-list, S-list. There's no notion of resizing, so we'll just delete that entirely. And in fact, the fact that this is private, you'll even notice if I highlight this, private not allowed here. It wouldn't make any sense to have private, right? Private inherently is a secret implementation detail, so it doesn't make sense to make it part of the list interface. No one's ever going to use it. How about add last? Okay, well, we already had that. That sounds pretty good. Should list get last? Okay, now I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. Okay, get. Yeah, seems good. Size. That seems like a normal list thing to do. You'll notice that it's the public things I'm keeping. Here's remove last. Here's insert. That seems good. Add first and get first. Okay, and then I need to close my class. So if I look at all this, we'll notice something interesting. I have now specified what a list61b is and not how it's done. And so if we think about the universe I've crafted, this is all the things a list61b can do. So you can think about this almost like a specification of what someone who is, say, a police officer should be able to do. Okay, so all the things a police officer should be able to do, let's say, take fingerprints, or make phone calls, drive a car, whatever. All the things that a police officer should be able to do, that's the list. And if anybody says, I am a police officer, you can assume, yes, they know how to drive a car. Okay? How about the next thing? Well, the next step is we are going to specify that something actually is a list61b. So in this case, we'll use the new implements keyword in this case to specify that relationship. So just like before we had interface as the new thing, now we'll have implements, and it'll look a little something like this. Okay? So let's go into our A-list class, and let's say implements list61b. Okay? Now, I actually messed up. It should have been list61b item. I was thinking, my phone buzzed and kind of made me think about something else. So we implement list61b and item, and that's it. Okay, now we'll go to slist, do the same thing. Implements list61b item. And so at that point, once I've done that, this is the universe we live in. Okay, so what? Oh, also, this should match the earlier one, blurb. So what, Josh? You should be asking me. Well, so what is now this, okay? So remember our longest class. We don't like the idea of having multiple longest methods, some for slist, some for alist. And so now that we've defined this interface, we can actually do list 61b, okay? That should work fine. And so if we run this code here, see we get back watching. And even if we change a list in the test drive here, do run again, watch it. So it's kind of like before. If we had the directions that explain how to wash a dog, we've now built a machine that can clean any kind of a dog, not just Malamutes, not just poodles, but any type of poodle, or sorry, any kind of dog.